a chiropractor. I go to these seminars. These are my buddies. These are my friends. I want them to be successful. I want chiropractic to be successful. I want chiropractors to be successful. And so if we aren't doing the things to set them up for success, I'm the one who has to deal with that at a seminar. And I don't want to have one of my friends, one of my colleagues pissed off at me because I care about their practices so much more than anyone.
All right, Genesis Nation. I am happy to deliver and share with you this young man, Dr. Kendall Price. We are colleagues, so I feel like I don't want to one up you on that. But can I call you Kendall? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Genesis Nation, this is a super sharp chiropractor, beyond chiropractic, business-wise. I had the privilege of meeting Kendall in Chicago at it was the ISPCA. Did I get that right?
Yeah. IPSCA. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right. I was
close. There's a lot of letters there, right?
But so Kendall is highly involved from a political perspective in pushing principle-based chiropractic. I don't want to say pushing, but sharing principle-based chiropractic and providing a great experience for chiropractors in the Prairie State to really provide the best of patient care. And patient care doesn't work if we have no butts in seats. True. Obviously you figured something out. And today we're going to talk about Elevate Marketing Solutions, which is your newer company. And I would love for you to share with our audience, how you evolved from a practitioner to a businessman and marketer. And we'll dive into it from there.
Yeah. I mean, so number one, thank you for all of that. It's been kind of a ride, right? I realized very early in practice that I was doing the same things that most people do to grow the practice, right? I mean, obviously pushing internal referrals, obviously doing things like screenings and health talks. And early on, this Facebook was, kind of in its infancy when I started into practice as far as the ads side of things went. And I started dabbling in it pretty early. And kind of realized that it was a very untapped market. And so, I ran ads, with multiple different marketing agencies, right? I worked with like 6 or 7 different agencies across the board. And there was things about each of them that I really liked, right? But on the flip side, there was things that I didn't like. And, I happened to be sitting with my neighbor who I did some real estate deals with in the condo building that I own. And he was running ads for his gyms that he owned. He owned three Anytime Fitnesses. And he said, well, I know how to run ads. He's like, I could probably do it for you. Let's see what we can do. And he started running ads and he was getting better results than anyone I had ever worked with. But the thing that I realized as we got into this is like, hey, there's something to this. And so we sat down and we started working through like, here's what chiropractic is. He had been longtime patient in my office, his wife, his kids, right? And so he loved chiropractic. He loved the natural health stance that we took. But it was getting that next step to say, like, how do we make this work for chiropractors better, right? How do we build systems and operating SOPs that work in a chiropractic office and that work really, really well. And as we started kind of doing that, I'll be honest, in the beginning, it was very self-serving to start, right? I was doing it for myself, right? This is your own practice. Yeah, this is what I wanted to build. But I realized that there's a lot of practices that are like mine out there, right? I've gone through the gambit of, coaching at mentor groups and different things and picked up little pieces here and there. And I realized that a lot of practices are kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things. But when you can systemize and put something in place that not only is going to get the lead in the door, have a back end sequence to nurture that person, have someone that you can rely on to be able to make database decisions, right? When I first started in this, I didn't understand why I would run a high intent lead form versus a low intent lead form, or why I would do a landing page versus a lead form, or why I would run an ad on Google versus running an ad on Facebook. And so the perspective that I really take is that you've got to be, it's going to be right time, right message, right place. And so that's not always the same for everybody. And everyone, I think that a lot of times we just kind of shotgun blast, kind of a fire, fire ready aim sort of
Just
thing.
like that wide net.
Yeah. And so
Even on this opening. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm excited because I got a lot of different, like even your opening statement of your evolution has me with a lot of questions. First of all, just want to point out that, and if you agree or not, the screenings, the talks, the healthcare classes, those things are great. They're just more challenging to scale than
Right.
digital marketing per se. And there are organizations and things out there that help you scale those, but
Absolutely.
I look at it as like you've got to do everything. Like you've got to have several irons in your fire as far as marketing is concerned. Because if one drops, you got to ramp up the other and basically turn the faucets.
And I think that that's the thing that I see with doctors more than anything is that there's a lack of consistency in the things that they do. Right. I was on a podcast the other day, and I told them that you have to be, do, and have. Right. Everybody wants to have, but they don't want to be the person that they need to be and do the things that they need to do to have the things that they want to have. And so if we don't get those first two things right, consistency is key, right? What are you doing, right? Like in my office, Tuesdays and Fridays, I worked a half day on Tuesday, and I was working on my practice. I didn't see patients, right? You get the, it must be nice to have hours like that, or the 2 hour window in the middle of the day.
It's not like you were sleeping. You were working on the business versus in the business. So from that model, that be, do, have model, you wanted to have a flourishing practice.
Right.
So you had to be a CEO and then do the things that the CEO does, which, or you're the chief marketing officer, right?
Right.
And the CEO and everything else in order to have that flourishing practice. Is that accurate?
And that's exactly it. If you don't put the steps in place in order to get yourself to that position, I know you and I had a conversation about how burnout is a real thing in chiropractic offices.
Yes. Yeah.
And the thing about it is that happens because you've lost your passion and your purpose. Because honestly, I think that a lot of times it's hard being a doc in office practicing day in and day out. It's mentally, physically, emotionally exhausting at times. And so we've got to do things to build our businesses to be resilient enough to work on it. Right. And so
I love that. And that's even why why I do what I do here with Genesis and, in Genesis Nation, because that's another piece that, one thing that I've continually telling even myself is strengthen my strengths, outsource my weaknesses. Right. So like I know a good amount about digital marketing, but I'm not going to take it on myself.
Yeah.
I want to, vet the right companies and do that. We're going to be able to talk forever on this. I want to dial in just on the mechanics of marketing per se, because I want our Genesis Nation really to see, why Elevate Marketing Solutions is different. And can you dive into a little bit of, like the strategy behind whether it's Google marketing, Facebook, YouTube, social media, or are you going one direction over another? Organic content? What's your direction there?
So broad scale, I look at marketing like an investment, and I think that every office should look at marketing like an investment. Right? There's things that are going to be slow, consistent burn, and then there's going to be things that are real hot at times and real low at times. And so understanding where you are in practice is going to dictate the decisions that you make. Right? So I'll give you an example. I know you're familiar with kind of the TRP model of practice, right? In the build, scale, and exit sort of model, right? Different offices are in different stages, and those different stages are going to dictate what you should be doing, what sort of offer you should be running, sort of things, right? A $21 new patient special is not right for everybody, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, a $49 is not right for everybody, right? Market is going to dictate that, and the things that we do, right? So one of the things
the life cycle of where you are in practice, which I love that model from TRP is brilliant, where it's build, scale, exit, correct? Did I get that
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I'm going to get slapped if I don't get it right.
And so, so we looked at that and we realized, like, how do we figure out what is different or what it is that we can do to be able to get the best success, right? And so one of the things that we do with all of our clients before they onboard with us is we do what's called our market analysis program, right? So we get their, the office's address, and we do demographic research based on that area. We look at different factors that are going to play in it, right? And we even do this for offices before they open. If they're saying, hey, I'm looking at 3 different places, which one's going to be the best? We can run dummy ads to look and see which one's going to get the most traffic. And it's going to help
Love
us to
that.
understand how that's going to perform, because we generally find that people who are in really strong digital marketing markets do really, really well. And so the more that we can do,
Regardless of competition.
right. And so, we can be able to push people into the right areas to open their practice, say, hey, this is going to be a better area, from an ad performance perspective. And what we find is that when they perform really well digitally, generally those other marketing methods perform excellent as well, which is really kind of a cool component to that, is because you're reaching out to what that avatar patient is of yours, right? Yeah. And so, but beyond that, right? I mean, I think that one of the things that I've seen consistently across a lot of the agencies that I worked with was, hey, ad spend's 1,500, right? That's great to sell you on the product, right? Because that's what a lot of digital marketing agencies, truth be told, they just want to get the sale, and they realize that the client is going to churn in 90 days or
got it.
days.
So they want constant new patients, constant new clients versus
And so the perspective of me, I'm a chiropractor. I go to these seminars. These are my buddies. These are my friends. I want them to be successful. I want chiropractic to be successful. I want chiropractors to be successful. And so if we aren't doing the things to set them up for success, I'm the one who has to deal with that at a seminar. And I don't want to have one of my friends, one of my colleagues pissed off at me because I care about their practices so much more than anyone.
And I would like, thank you for that. That's why I love working with you and like just talking with you, because you've been on the front lines. Now, the face of your company is not you. You're behind the scenes, but you're out schmoozing and marketing and marketing for yourself and making connections like this. And who is it that is the face of your company, so that people are aware when they see Go Elevate Marketing?
Yeah. So my business partner is Gil Valerio, right? So that is the gym owner that we talked about. That
awesome.
We worked together. We bought real estate, some real estate together, some commercial real estate that my practice is in, and that his gym is out of. One of his gyms is out of, and so we've developed this relationship. It's like I've got 3 older brothers, and I was talking to my mom last night. I said I'm as close with him now as I am with my own brothers, and
that's cool.
And so, but yeah, I mean, it's the point and the purpose of saying all of this is that when we do this market analysis program, I can be able to look at someone's market and say Little Rock and say, hey, $1,500 is going to do it. But I may look at someone in the Chicago suburbs and say, that's not going to cut it, right?
Right. It's too competitive. So you got to spend more to get in front.
And so we don't play in the sandbox of people who just want to sell, because truth be told, we don't have to, right? We've worked with over 700 offices. We've had over 100 offices that have become $1 million practices, which is pretty damn awesome, if you ask me.
And, that's helping the whole, that's like, the tide is rising all the boats. So like, as you're helping these individual offices, we need help. Chiropractors need help to run their businesses more efficiently instead of competing against each other. So I love what you're doing. What's the beef on SEO? Are you doing SEO? And is it one of those long, slow burn ones?
It's a long, slow burn, right? And this is something that I think a lot of chiropractors do not do, but it is so helpful in being able to create an online presence for you. But the other really cool thing about it is a diversified approach to your marketing is good, right? Facebook is going to create a lot of awareness, a lot of volume, a lot of leads. Google is going to create more high intention leads, right? Google ads. But the thing about it is how do you get the best performance out of that? It's having a really good back end SEO program to be able to boost it. And so you kind of have this, what in an ideal world, you want to have this three-prong approach where you're slow burn, right? Something that's reaching people who are very high intention, and then reaching people who, are interested, but they're a little bit colder, right? I mean, I think we all know that when it comes to practice and people who start care, it's like someone refers someone into you, it's like you're broke, I'll fix it. So and so already told you that I did a great job for them.
Much better patient.
Right. Then you're looking at someone who's coming from a talk or something like that. And then, kind of along that same line as Google and Facebook, you're like, at the end of the day, they're going to convert. They're going to be a less quality lead.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're not going to get quality leads from that. Right. Just sometimes you have to go through, like in my office, if 10 people walk in out of Facebook, I'm going to start probably 7 of them. Right. Because I've figured out how to nurture that relationship.
That's the exact question I was going to ask. So you actually have nurturing campaigns for depending on the temperature of the lead, so to speak.
Yeah. And so, our nurture sequence go out for 2 years. Right. And so the thing that is different is that, and so, Google is going to get that person in. They're looking for you. They're ready to make that decision. Whereas Facebook, you've got to nurture them.
Yep.
And so the sales cycle, even though maybe you get 100 leads in a month and maybe 25 of them come into your office, understand you've still got 75 leads that are able to be worked on and able to be nurtured. And the cool thing that we also did, and this was something that I sat down and said, offices don't have the time to make the calls that they need to, right? They just don't. And CAs are busy doing everything, and they should be focused on taking care of the people in the office.
Yes.
And so I brought in. We've got our own in-house call center.
Wow.
That I walked through. I trained on very very chiropractic centric scripts and sales based scripts that are along the line of getting to that patient's deeper why they're coming to the office.
A little more relational than just appointment setter.
Very much so, right? It's not a script of like, when would you like to schedule, right? It's building up to that, right? It's
rapport.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've done tests across this. And so at the end of the day, someone who uses our call center and uses our patient coordinators, we know that about 1 out of every 5 calls that they make is going to end up in a booked call. So where it wins is volume, right? And I can tell you that following up with leads in an offices do not get those numbers, right?
Right, because they're doing 8 other things, right? And never focused and trained to directly handle the objections on the phone. Does your option, like, or is it an option if I'm going to go with Elevate Marketing? And is the call center an option, or is it part of the package?
Yeah, it's included, right? Because ultimately we've set this up to set the doctors up for success. And so, they may not have as quality of a conversation as your office manager who's sitting in there and knows everything about the doctor and knows. But I can tell you that the quality of the conversation to get that patient booked is going to be much better than what any office is. And just by continued volume, we've bought, commercial systems and softwares that are really, really robust, that have follow-up sequences to be able to reach out to the leads, right? And so we're reaching out to leads within minutes, right? As opposed to, hey, we're on our lunch break and we have time, we can make that phone call, right? We've looked at the data and we're typically getting in contact with those people within the first 30 minutes that a lead comes in.
That makes a big difference. Like nowadays, especially when people are in acute pain, they want that call back quickly. I've seen it happen in my own office where they're like, "Oh, you didn't answer, you didn't respond quick enough. I'm found somebody else," and it was like 35 minutes later. So
yeah,
that's a good variable there. So if you were to summarize I would say, I don't want to say like, because I know you see the most common mistakes, but what are like the three high level tips? And I'm going to say consistency is one of those. So so being consistent with your
Yep.
marketing, I don't want to answer this question for you because I want you to add some more in here for me. Varied funnels, right?
Yep.
So we're talking about screenings and talks from the digital perspective, even varied there as well. What other like top level tips can you give our Genesis Nation?
I think two things that I would say, and I know we've talked about one of these before, is that chiropractors need to stop being practitioners from the sense that they need to be clinicians and they need to be business owners. And you have to make time for both, right? So that's the first thing that I would say. We need to take our doctor brain off for a minute and set it to the side and put our business owner hat on and say, are we making decisions for our business that are going to push our business forward or take us backwards? Right. And so I see a lot of that. And the biggest one that I see that in is in the way that we spend our dollars in marketing. Right.
Mm.
So, and I'm like throwing my hands up, hallelujah, praise when Stephen Franson gets up on stage and says you should be spending your marketing budget should be 10% of whatever number you want to get to. That's a scaling number, right? So if you're at 20,000 or $30,000 a month, right, and you want to get to 50, you should be
Spend
spending that money
five
to
grand.
get there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so and I've had this conversation. Well, in fact, I had a conversation with a fractional CFO not just a couple of weeks ago, and he said that the number one thing and he works specifically with chiropractors, and the thing that he said that he sees more than anything when he looks at P&Ls is that they are not spending enough on marketing. Right? Mm-hmm. Chiropractors have the mentality that, well, what do I have to spend to get results? Not what can I spend.
I love that. So, what do I have to spend? And I'm just going to kind of play that conversation back. It's a really important point because if you're a practice that's at 30,000 a month and you're spending 3 grand a month, right? That's 10% of your current. But if you want to get to 100,000 a month, you've got to use that, like you said, a scaling equation and invest and take that risk and spend $10,000 a month. But then that's accurate, correct? On your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so I give you, for instance, I had an analysis done on my business, and the the guy who came back and looked at it said, "You spend more on marketing than any practice I have ever seen in my life, any business I've seen in my life." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm testing, right? Because ultimately, I realized that in order for me to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work, I've got to spend money in order to do it." Right. And there's a point in time where you've got to pull a plug on things, but the problem is if you don't have enough leeway to test it and see what's really happening, there's no way that you can be able to get the results that you're looking for, right? And so, if I take $30,000 and I have right over 90 days and tested it to see how are these different things going to perform, and it doesn't perform the way I wanted it to, well, I either learned something or I made a lot of money off of it, right? And so I look at it from that perspective, and I think that not enough people look at things from that perspective because when it comes to things like ad spend, it's not a linear equation, right? If you spend $1,000 versus $3,000, it's not linear how many people that are going to come into that lead, right? There is a barrier to entry, and we did a study based off of some of the offices because I like to make decisions based off of data. Numbers don't lie, and so we did this analysis and we looked at we had two practices. One was mine, and one was an office that was a couple suburbs over. Right, same market, same general demographics. We tried to correlate this, and we've done this in other markets as well. One office that is going to spend maybe 1,000, 1,500 in ad spend a month, and then someone who spends double. You can start to look at the numbers and realize that there is a point of which the likelihood of getting a zero sum return when you spend less on your ads is substantially more than if you spend more, right? So we looked at two offices, and one was spending. So we looked at 60 days, right? And we said, okay, office A spent 3,000, office B spent 11, right? And we went through the numbers. What we realized is that The office that spent 3,000 over that time period got about a 1.5 x return on their money. Office B was like a 10x return. And so what's the difference?
Interesting.
Is that the risk tolerance, it's, yeah, I get it. It's hard to spend, $5,500 a month or whatever it is to be able to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
results. But sometimes you have to do that in order to get the best results. And that doesn't mean it's all in one place. It may be in multiple places, but it's doing it in a manner that's well thought out, and that's ultimately based on a decision and putting time, effort, energy, and work into making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do.
And it's data driven decisions, which is great.
It's
And just that mindset alone, Kendall, is what's going to help us run more, run our businesses as business owners and CEOs versus chiropractors. And that's that, like you said, it's a big transition. You got to take that hat off. And I would suggest for young chiropractors out there, put the time aside. Like you said, you were doing like those Tuesday, Thursday times is not playing golf. You
right.
were working on the business versus in, because our young chiros, or just maybe young or just starting in practice on their own, regardless of age, you need time to work on your business
Yeah.
because
And
it doesn't work itself.
yeah. And I mean, my first 3 years in practice, other than like holidays, I spent every single Saturday morning that I didn't have a big screening event in our community at the local GNC for 3 or 4 hours doing screenings, hustling and grinding to do it. And so ultimately, if you want to have the practice and the life that you desire, you got to be the person that's gonna get cut up a little bit, that's gonna get banged up a little bit, and get into
Yeah.
that uncomfortable stage. And unless
I'm
you
I'm
do,
I'm laughing
yeah,
because I spoke at Life University recently. One of the students said, like, how did you build your practice in the beginning? I said, stick your foot up in the air and let me see the bottom of your shoe. And I said, that's, you got to wear out your shoes, man. It's like businesses are built on the
yeah,
old, I think the old term is like the leather in your shoes. We're not wearing leather
yeah,
shoes anymore because we're
yeah.
chiropractors and we're smart about our feet. But yeah, you got to burn the rubber off the bottom of your shoes.
It's funny. Like I graduated from life. 6 months later, I opened my practice. My wife gave birth to our oldest 8 days after graduation,
Wow.
and we network marketed, did all the networking events, all the screenings, all the everything leading up to our open. We'd come home, we'd have dinner, and then we'd put our daughter in the stroller and we'd go walk door to door, knocking on doors, introducing ourselves to people in the community.
You're the in 2 days, you're the
And
second chiropractor I've talked to, and myself. I remember being out in the rain and holding an umbrella. So, all right, enough of the war stories because we're going to tell them.
yeah,
But bottom line is grit is important,
grit
and
is important.
stacking intelligent business practices on top of grit is what's going to create sustainability for a practice. What's that number two? That second item, because you said you had two items that you want to share,
Yeah,
or did we already hit
it's
it?
it's I think it's the from the business owner's perspective, being okay being uncomfortable, because there are times when you have to be uncomfortable in the decisions that you make, right?
Yeah.
And I said this yesterday. I was on the Cairo Hustle podcast yesterday, and I said, or 2 days ago, and I said, you get to choose your hard when it comes to practice, right? I'm at a stage where I don't do those screenings anymore because I've got associates and I've got people in my office that do that sort of things and that. But I've earned the ability,
Yeah,
right? And so
because you
I
did
get
them.
to choose. I get to choose my hard, right? I can choose a hard life, a hard practice, or I can choose to do hard work, make hard decisions to grow and do the things that I want, have the things that I want. And ultimately, for me, the whole reason I got into this whole thing is I want to see chiropractors be more successful.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem having an uncomfortable conversation with chiropractor to tell them this is where you're messing up. And I'm not saying this because I want to dog you or I want to tell you you're doing things wrong. But I say this because I love you and because I want you to be successful and I want chiropractic to be successful and I want us to be a profession that takes on the juggernauts of the world, being you know, the David versus Goliath, so to speak, against the medical machine.
I've used that metaphor often, even for Genesis, as being the slingshot.
Yep.
David's slingshot for Goliath, and you, my friend, are a slingshot for chiropractors in
Appreciate
general.
that.
So,
Yeah.
and I appreciate your leadership in the field, and you do it with a calm confidence, and that's what I think we need. It's like, because I appreciate your humility and approach to this, because I can see that it's like you're basing your decisions on data, and you're working your ass off. So it's like it's a combination of how how I want to see the profession grow. So I'm gonna make this our stopping point, because
Yeah.
I think you've got it all out there. And then Genesis Nation, if you want to learn more about Kendall's operation, it's goelevatemarketing.com, correct?
Yep.
And
Yep.
we'll put everything in the notes underneath the show, and check it out. You're running a great operation, and it's, you've been in the field, you haven't been out, doing other things for 20 years and then back into marketing. Like, you've applied this to your office. So thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to working together more in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.